This is the least expensive ultralight pack I've ever come across, weighing under 400 grams and only costing $125. And I'm gonna be testing it next to 4 other pieces of unique ultralight gear to see whether they're worth buying or they sacrifice too much performance and features in order to achieve that weight. Conditions for this trip are gonna be interesting with overnight lows approaching freezing, and there's the potential for really strong winds gusting up to 70 kilometers an hour. Those conditions are gonna be really interesting for the tent and sleep system that I'm testing on this trip, alongside a new stove system that I've never used before. There's 3 things that I'm really gonna be looking at when I'm testing this gear. The first one is, even though the gear is ultralight, does it perform the key task that it's supposed to? For example, does this pack allow me to carry weight effectively, and does it allow me to access items I need throughout the day? Ultralight gear also often has compromises involved with it, so I'm gonna see if this gear has too many compromises in order for me to recommend it. And then the third thing, and probably most important, is this gear safe to use? Because some of it is budget friendly, some of it is kind of pushing the limits of ultralight. And when you do that, you can get into situations where the gear just becomes unsafe. The pack I'm testing is the DeSolo Talic 35. Its claim to fame is that it's lightweight and affordable. DeSolo says that it can carry up to 20 pounds comfortably and it has reachable side pockets. I'm gonna be putting those claims to the test, as well as seeing if there's anything missing on this pack feature-wise. And then for the features that it does have, is there anything that doesn't work well? Because like I said, we're getting a very low weight with this pack, as well as a very low cost. And you'd think that there'd have to be compromises in order to achieve that. I've already determined that the side water bottle pockets are reachable, even with my short T-Rex arms and bad shoulder flexibility. So the other things I need to test, weight and then features. I have about 6 kilometers to hike until I get to the spot where I want to camp tonight. So it should be a good test of this pack. I have about 23 pounds in the pack, so I'm gonna be pushing the weight carrying capacity of the pack by a little bit, but it should be a pretty good test for it. I'm stopping for a little break with a view. Let's use this opportunity to talk about some of the features that the DeSolo pack has. First of all, right now you may have noticed that there's no hip belt on it, and that's because I chose to do that. The pack does come with a hip belt, but I found that in my initial testing, it wasn't really taking much of the load off of my shoulders, and I found it more annoying than anything. So I removed it, and it's now a frameless, hip beltless pack. Even though it's frameless, it does have this foam sheet here that is removable that provides some structure to the back. I left that in, but I think in the future I'd probably remove it because it just kind of rides up and ends up being more annoying than anything. And then you have 2 side water bottle pockets that, like I said, easy to reach water with, and then 1 big front stretchy pocket. So overall, pretty minimal pack, and I'm okay with that because it keeps the weight of the pack down. The materials and then the finish of the pack is so-so. It's not made with premium materials or premium straps, but it gets the job done and it keeps the price down. What does annoy me a little bit is that there's no top strap, and then all the straps that are on the pack are a little bit annoying to use. The chest strap's annoying, the hip belt was annoying when I had it on here. And I think that could be improved without really increasing the cost or the weight much. From a volume standpoint, I think it's great. You're probably gonna max out its carrying ability before you max out the volume. And I think for a lot of people, it'll be a good 1 or 2 night pack. But for those of you who have really ultralight gear, then you'll probably be able to squeeze maybe up to a week out of this pack. So I do think this pack could be a good pack for thru hikers. The big question mark is gonna be durability, and that's something that we're gonna have to take a look at over the long term and not just with an overnight test. I'm gonna keep hiking, and then I'll let you know once we get to camp how well this pack carried the 23 pounds that I have inside of it. As well, there's a couple features I wish it had that I wanna highlight. I think I found the spot where I'm gonna set up camp. That hike was more than I bargained for. I was hiking through an area that had seen recent forest fire, and I didn't really wanna stop in there. So I just kept hiking, and water's been super scarce. Even areas that normally would have at least a little puddle, no water. This is the driest I've ever seen the desert. But I have my camp spot now and I'm ready to get set up. Looks pretty sandy, so luckily I brought what is potentially the lightest freestanding tent on the market. The tent's the Tarp Tent Double Rainbow, but the new sill poly version. I know a lot of you are really big fans of the Double Rainbow, so I'm excited to try it out. And what has me really intrigued is that normally it's a semi-freestanding tent with a pole arch that goes over top of the middle. But if you introduce 2 trekking poles at either end, then it can allegedly become fully freestanding. So I'm excited to try that out, get it set up, and then see how it performs and whether I like the Tarp Tent Double Rainbow as much as you guys. As far as the pack goes, I think I got a pretty good test with it. I hiked almost 20 kilometers today, and I'm feeling it in my shoulders. I'm not used to frameless, hip beltless packs right now, but this one carries weight a little bit less well than some of the other ones that I've used, like the Durson Wapta 30. That being said, I do have it overloaded with more weight than they claim it can carry. So I have 23 pounds in it. They say it's good to 20 pounds, but I thought it could handle more than advertised. And I think I'm a little bit right. I think it could handle up to 25 pounds if you have kind of built up to that much weight with it, but it's not quite as good as some other packs. There's 3 things I'd modify with this pack. I'd add a bottom pocket. I'd take that weight and price penalty in order to have that feature. I'd also redesign the shoulder straps a little bit, probably make them curved a little bit differently and slightly longer. I found that it ended a little bit kind of in my armpit, which isn't really what I like. With the third thing, I just realized I don't need to worry about it because it actually comes with a top strap system here. It was just hidden inside the pack. So there's little toggles that you add to loops on the pack, and then you have a top strap. So if you want to strap on a bear can or a chair or anything really, then you have that ability with this top strap. So let's get the tent set up. We'll see how freestanding mode works with it. And then I still have to share with you guys my sleep system. I'm testing the most ultralight quilt that I've ever used, and it should be interesting with the temperatures we're going to see tonight. And then a $70 sleeping pad that could perform way above its price point. And I'm going to be trying an alcohol stove. And I'm a little bit nervous about it because I've never used one, didn't even practice. So here we go, the Tarp Tent Double Rainbow Steel Poly single wall version in freestanding mode. And the real test of freestanding mode is whether you can pick up the tent and move it. And it looks like I can. The one kind of gripe I have with the term freestanding is that with a lot of the tents, you still need to stake out the vestibules, and that's the case with the Double Rainbow. I'm not gonna really knock it too much because I could open those up, roll them back, and then it kind of looks freestanding. So I'm gonna do that, and we'll take a look and see what the inside looks like and get everything set up, because I think I'm gonna be eating and then going to bed because I am tired. I took the tent out of freestanding mode. I took out the trekking poles because it just seemed like it was messing with the pitch. So it seemed to be a little bit better pitch now. The trekking pole freestanding mode system seems like I probably won't use it. If I need a freestanding tent, I'll just bring a true freestanding tent. But I guess if you want just one tent to do it all and maybe save some weight, then you could use this mode. But maybe I need to play around with it a little bit more on better ground. But that kind of defeats the point of freestanding mode. So, well, jury's out on freestanding mode with the Rainbow. But what I am impressed with is how much space is inside this tent. There is a ton of space at the head and foot end. And because it's single wall, that is amazing. It means you're not going to be touching the inner fly with your sleeping bag or your head. And after seeing the single walled version of this tent, it's definitely, I think, the way to go. It's a lot lighter than the double walled version, and you don't need that double wall in order to protect you from the fly because of how roomy it is on the inside. And then we have my sleep system. We're gonna start off with the sleeping pad because this is what I set up first. It's a nature hike pad with an R value of 5.8. It weighs just over 500 grams and costs $70, so very inexpensive. I've already used this pad on a test night already where it got down to 10 degrees Celsius, so quite warm, but I was very warm on this pad. I could feel my heat being reflected up to me. So I'm really excited to test it on this trip where it's gonna potentially get down to freezing. Other than warmth, the other thing I really wanna test with this pad is comfort. It does have a dimpled baffling system, but the dimples are smaller and they're not as raised as some other pads out there. So my initial testing, I didn't find it as comfortable as some other pads with dimpled baffling, but it really takes an entire night on a pad to figure out how comfortable it is. So we're gonna do that tonight and see if this is really one of the best deals on the market or if it's a bit of a bust from a warmth and comfort standpoint. And then there's my quilt. This is the Z-Packs Solo Quilt 30-degree version, and it's pretty insane. It weighs under 400 grams, 377 grams. It costs an arm and a leg at over $400, but that's because it's made with premium materials. You have really high fill power down, 70-year shell fabric. Actually, that's about it. That's the only thing that goes into a quilt. This one goes above and beyond though, with not only the materials being lightweight, but it also has a very minimal pad strap on it and only one pad strap. Usually quilts will have two in order to really lock out drafts. So this is a scenario where I might be going a little bit too far down the ultralight rabbit hole. We'll see tonight if I'm able to stay warm, whether the pad strap system is able to keep out drafts, or if this is now my go-to ultralight quilt for above freezing temperatures, because that'd be pretty exciting at 377 grams. Normally I wouldn't test both a new sleeping pad and a new quilt on the same trip because I like to kind of have one of those be a known variable, but you know what? I'm living life on the edge of this trip and I feel like I've gotten really good at feeling with my body whether I'm losing heat from the top insulation or through the sleeping pad. So tonight I'm gonna be putting that skill to the test. I'm getting pretty hungry, so I should probably get my stove figured out. Like I said, I'm using an alcohol stove for the very first time ever. I'm intrigued by them because there's two main benefits that people say they bring to the table. The first one being that they're very quiet, which is nice when you're out in the wilderness and trying to just enjoy some solitude. The second thing is that you can bring just the amount of fuel that you need. So if you're going on an overnighter, you can bring just a little bit of fuel. You're gonna save weight that way instead of having to bring an entire fuel canister. For this trip, I just picked up the fuel here at a local Walmart. It's the yellow heat bottles, so antifreeze, I guess. It's methanol, I think. So don't drink it. And from what I've heard, you don't want to be inhaling the fumes. But what has me questioning the alcohol stove is first its reliability, and that's partly because I'm just not used to it. I think I'll probably get used to it and then I'll say it's reliable enough. But then the second thing is that it's not very fast. And we're gonna see how slow it actually is on this trip. I'm gonna boil 500 milliliters of water, see how long it takes as well as how much fuel it takes. I've heard that about 20 mils is enough to boil 500 milliliters of water, so we'll see if that's accurate. Compared to a BRS stove, which is about the same weight as this, the BRS stove takes 2.5 minutes to boil 500 milliliters of water. So we'll see how the alcohol stove compares. Step one, put in the fuel. So I'm gonna put in about half this container, which is about 30 mils. So that basically fills up this alcohol stove, which is probably what they intended, basically one 500 mil boil. And then that should get it going. Yep, so it's running, and I'm gonna let it kind of heat up a little bit. I don't know if that's what you're supposed to do, but that's what my instinct is telling me to do. So let this get a little bit warm, put some water into my pot, and then put the pot on and start the timer. Listen to how quiet this thing is. This is my mic. That's about a foot away. So it just ran out of fuel. I added a little bit more and relit it. So hopefully we can get a boil going. It's been 10 minutes. Kind of a terrible design if it's gonna run out of fuel before you even get a boil of 500 mils. What if you wanted to boil like a liter or something? So it ran out of fuel again, and I'm too hungry. It's been 14 minutes. The water temperature's at 75 degrees. I can tell by this little sticker I have on here, which is enough to rehydrate a meal. So I'm gonna use the water that I got. Not super impressed with the alcohol stove so far. It's a little bit finicky, but I also imagine that you get used to it, especially if you have a stove system that you are familiar with, and you maybe have one that has a little bit more capacity and is a little bit better. But as it stands, at the end of the day, the last thing I want to do is be fiddling around with something and be waiting 20 minutes to eat my dinner. I'm going to say that my first experience with an alcohol stove was not a success, but I'm sure all you alcohol stove fanatics are going to tell me everything that I did wrong in the comments. So, and I look forward to that because I want to learn and I want to try it again and see if I can make it work, because I do like how quiet it is and I do like the versatility of the fuel. I'm excited to eat because I am starving, and then after that I'll probably just crawl right into bed and hopefully get a good night's sleep with that quilt and sleeping pad system because I need it. I am pooped. Good night, and I'll let you guys know in the morning how things went. Good morning. Let's start off by talking about the tent because last night got a little interesting. The wind picked up in a pretty big way, and I didn't think that the tarp tent rainbow was gonna make it. It was just getting blown around all over the place. It was collapsing in spots. So I got out of the tent and I put rocks on all the corners in order to reinforce the tent stakes. And then I put up these guy lines, and it was still kind of seemed like it was gonna fail. So I thought, you know what would really help the tent is if there were trekking poles supporting the peak. But then to my surprise, when I looked up at the peaks, Tarp Tent had already thought about this. They installed little grommets that the trekking poles can insert into. And then once I put trekking poles on both sides, it just really locked down the tent and became super stable. I didn't have a way to test the wind speed, but my guess is that it was gusting up to about 40 kilometers an hour. That's probably my conservative guess on that. And the tent was holding up really well with the reinforcing trekking poles. For the sleep system, temperatures were around 5 degrees Celsius for most of the night, but they did dip down to 1 degree Celsius for about an hour and a half. And at that temperature, I was starting to feel a little bit of heat loss through the down quilt. Not a ton, but enough to think, you know what, this is probably the limit of this quilt. And I was actually surprised that it was able to get down that low because when I set it up, it did not seem like it was a very poofy quilt. Did not seem like it had a lot of kind of loft to it, but it's lofted up over the course of the night and has turned out to be quite warm. Drafts are also not a problem, and it would have been highlighted with this wind. There's a lot of wind coming through the mesh of the tent, but that single pad strap locked the quilt onto the pad pretty well. And then with a neck cinch and everything like that, I did not have any drafts coming in, which was cool to see. For clothing, I was wearing a full Alpha Direct 90 set, top, bottom, and socks, and then my merino wool toque and a buff. I'm definitely gonna be trying this quilt out more on my more ultralight focused trips because the weight's insane. And the fact that it kept me warm down to freezing is a really good sign. As for the sleeping pad, I didn't feel any heat loss through the pad at all, which is a really good sign. If anything, I felt quite warm on it, so I think it could push below the freezing mark pretty easily, and I was moderately comfortable on it. I laid on my back, on my side, and I didn't really have any arms going numb or anything like that. The one thing is that it is a thinner pad, so if you're on the bigger side, if you're heavier, then it may not be quite thick enough for you. But even though it might not be quite as warm as an X-Lite, it's more comfortable than an X-Lite and costs a third the price of an X-Lite. So a lot of really good kind of things going for this pad, and I'm excited to test it out more and potentially have it as one of my top recommendations. I have a flight to catch, so I'm gonna take down camp and we'll talk about what my final verdicts are on this gear, what gear I recommend, what gear I think needs a little bit more testing once we get on the trail. Let's start off with the quilt because I can't recommend this quilt for everyone. It's definitely a niche product meant for people who are going as ultralight as possible and want a lot of compressibility, because the premium materials that it's made of, while really cool, make it so that you have to take care of it a little bit more. It's gonna be more susceptible to humidity and dirt and grime. So unless you're an FK tier or a fast packer, I don't think you should really be looking at the solo quilt. As for the sleeping pad, durability and reliability are still up in the air, so time will tell on those, but the price, the warmth, and the comfort are really impressive. So definitely a pad to keep on your radar. For the tarp tent double rainbow, the size is probably its strongest feature. It's a super long tent, very roomy. So if you're on the taller end and still want to be able to take an ultralight tent with you, then probably take a look at the tarp tent double rainbow. There's definitely some nuances to it that I'm still figuring out. So a lot of testing still to go with that tent before I can make it kind of a top recommendation, but still a very exciting tent. The alcohol stove, I think there's still a lot for me to get used to while using it, but it's a cool concept and I'm not writing it off quite yet, but it's probably not gonna be my go-to when I'm going on trips. For the pack, it definitely makes some compromises in order to achieve the weight and price, but it gets the job done. And I think it's a great option for someone who is usually not an ultralight backpacker, but is curious to dabble with a frameless ultralight pack. This is a great option to try out without giving up an arm and a leg. I think this trip really highlighted that there's gonna be compromises when you're pushing the limits of ultralight gear with weight or price. Every piece of gear that we looked at on this trip had some sort of compromise, but it's cool to see where the technology and products are going in the ultralight realm. Go check out this video if you want to see me test 5 pieces of gear geared towards solo backpacking. I test what could be one of the best solo tents out there and talk about reliability and redundancy when it comes to solo backpacking.